Namaste, and welcome to everyone to our continuous studies of Synthesis of Yoga with Ranganath. We are studying chapter 3, the threefold life, page 25, the para starts, but such seclusion.
Yeah. So, before we start reading, we are having this class once a week, so we forget the context. So, I'll tell you what he has said in the previous para, and then we will start reading the next para. He is discussing the mental man. He has discussed the material man, he is discussing the material man, then he will discuss the spiritual man. The threefold life. Mine has got a choice of three lives: an ordinary physical vital life, a mental life, and a spiritual life. So he is now discussing the mental life, whether something can be, some amount of religion can be given to him or some amount of spirituality can be given to him. This is what he has discussed previously. Now, he has also told you that the mental man is idealistic. He wants everything perfection. He wants perfection and progress all the time. In contrast to the material man who wants a status quo. He doesn't want progress. He wants to just maintain the conditions as they exist for him. So, he has said earlier, the ideals of the mental man cannot be easily realized in the practical day-to-day living. Very often, the thinker, the philosopher, the poet, scholar, scientist, researcher are repelled by the gulf between the gulf of the mental life and the physical life and withdraw into the solitude of their own respective fields. They may be described as the sannyasins of the intellect, and the work they have done for humanity is well recorded. That's what he has said in the previous one. They tend to withdraw from physical life. So, Srimati is discussing because he does not want any withdrawal from the physical life. He wants full participation in the physical life, knowing fully well the difficulties of the physical life. Still, he says that is the ultimate aim. God is manifesting himself here, and the ascetic, if he chooses, he can leave the physical world and go away. But my integral yoga does not want to reject the physical world. But he says now he is discussing seclusion from the physical world. Is it justified in some cases? That's what he's going to discuss. But such seclusion is justified only by some special activity. Mind finds fully its force and action only when it casts itself upon life and accepts equally its possibilities and its resistances as the means of a greater self-perfection. In the struggle with the difficulties of the material world, the ethical development of the individual is firmly shaped and the great schools of conduct are formed. By contact with the facts of life, art attains to vitality. Thought eschews its abstractions. The generalizations of the philosopher base themselves on a stable foundation of science and experience. So, he is saying that sometimes withdrawal from the physical world may be justified. But he says that on the contrary, when even the idealism of the mind does not reject the physical world, it enriches itself in some ways. Because when you are running away from the physical world, you are avoiding the problem. But if you don't avoid the problem and remain and face the problem squarely, then you will benefit because now you know how to conquer that difficulty. That's basically what he's saying. We'll go to each sentence and see whether it's clear. But such seclusion is justified only by some special activity. We'll dwell a little on this sentence because he himself, he's saying that you should not withdraw from physical life. And what did Sri Aurobindo do? From 1926 to 1950, he withdrew from the physical world. But he participated in it psychologically. Don't forget that. He took interest in what was going on in the world, particularly because the World War came in. His work in the physical world was hampered by the hostile forces which brought in the World War, which is part of the those who don't understand Srimanda will not appreciate this. But the world war was definitely a big drawback for his work. And before that, the hostile forces tried a smaller trick. They broke his leg in 1939. Or was it 38? 1938. And then 1939, the world was plunged into
Second
chaos.
World War.
Yeah. So,
Ranganath, if you can elaborate on this a little more, because a lot of people, they have this reservation is a lesser word against Sri Aurobindo, that he himself did not live what he was preaching.
that's not true, because I'll tell you why. And it's interesting. Here is Shankara saying that the physical world is unreal, and he
Maya.
goes 4 times Digvijay up from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. And here is Srimanda saying, I don't reject the physical world, and he rejects it for 24 years. Okay, so actually it was not a rejection in that sense. Okay, because rejection has got many types of meanings. There is a physical rejection, there is a psychological rejection, and there is also a spiritual rejection. The ascetic is rejecting spiritually. I don't want the physical world at all. He may live in the forest, he can't escape from the physical world, but he is escaping psychologically also. I am not concerned with the imperfections of the physical world. Okay, but in Sri Aurobido's case, he withdrew himself because when you are in the physical world, you are assaulted, you are attacked by all the physical forces, vital forces, mental forces, all sorts of forces that are coming into you. This is something that you have to understand. We are also being constantly subjected to all these forces coming into us, but we are unconscious. We are absolutely unconscious of it. And that's why we are really a puppet in the hands of nature. We are not at all in control of ourselves. It's a body, mind, life and universal nature which is controlling us. So what Sri Aurobindo wanted to do was, he wanted to keep these forces out and concentrate on his work. And he never lost contact with the physical world because he was guiding everybody. He was guiding mother also in the administration of the ashram. He was supporting her from behind. Okay? There are so many complaints about the mother, this, that, but he was always explaining mother's role and supporting her from behind. She was doing the actual work in the physical world, but he was always there. He never withdrew spiritually from the physical world.
And he was influencing some of the political people. Some of the political people Sri Aurobindo was influencing.
Yes.
Like
Okay, we'll come to that.
I'm saying that in the agenda she says that during that period, people thought that she was doing everything. But she had the sense as if she is not doing anything. It is Sri Aurobindo who is doing it.
Yes, because he was doing through her. That's right. In a very wide and open sense, mother was the Prakriti and he is the Purusha who is actually guiding her action. Okay? But this has to be understood in a very wide sense, because she is not Prakriti in the sense of a apara Prakriti. She is para Prakriti acting in the physical world. Okay? She is an avatar. This question of the avatar being male or female also is an interesting question, but she was definitely an avatar. There is no doubt about it. Okay, so now that is the reason why Sri Aurobindo withdrew. And that's why he is saying here, but such seclusion is justified only by some special activity. What was the special activity that Sri Aurobindo wanted to do? He wanted to concentrate and pull the supermind down into the physical world. This is work that he had to do. And he was doing it constantly. Mother said once, I see him pulling, and I am seeing him all the time concentrating and pulling it down. See, he can pull, but we people should not pull. Pulling is not a very good thing when you are not a master of yourself. Okay? It can. In our case, pulling is a psychological greed, you can say. So that is not a correct way. When Sri Aurobindo is pulling, he is pulling in a divine manner. So we should not pull, we should aspire, we should rather give ourselves to the divine. I go to the next sentence. So it is very clear that Sri Aurobindo is saying under certain circumstances, it is justified for a certain amount of time. Even an ordinary sadhak, he can withdraw to a certain amount of time when he faces a difficulty. He says that in the synthesis later on also. You are justified for a short period to concentrate on what you have to do and not mix too much with the physical world. Mind, but on the contrary, what happens? Mind finds fully its force and action only when it casts itself upon life and accepts equally its possibilities and its resistances as a means for a greater perfection. When you avoid a problem, you don't solve the problem. When you face it headlong and conquer it, then you are master of the problem. That's basically what he's saying. Okay, so and resilience. In the struggle with the difficulties of the material world, the ethical development of the individual is firmly shaped and the great schools of conduct are formed. The great schools of conduct he will discuss in the next para or maybe a little later. Okay, Epicureanism, Stoicism, these are all
Greek.
these are all the schools of philosophy of conduct that he discusses. By contact with the facts of life, art attains to vitality. Thought assures its abstractions. The generalizations of the philosopher base themselves on a stable foundation of science and experience. This is a very interesting statement what he's making. We'll have a look at it. By contact with the facts of life, art attains to vitality. The best example I can give you is in European art. Okay, Rembrandt and all these people, they were only making portraits. Okay, but come the French, the Impressionists, Paul Gauguin, Monet, Manet, Cézanne, all these people, they went out into life and they were painting not still life, okay? Apples on a table or something, not this, mixing with life, going into the market, seeing picnics, going here, drawing nature. So that's exactly what he's saying. It gets art attains to vitality. Life comes in. Okay. When you are doing still life, in fact, still life is the word used for art when you are painting a. Mother has got many examples of still life. Okay? Yeah. In her upstairs, you will see
in studio
apples and pots. You know. So there's no vitality in that. When you draw people walking, moving, okay. In fact, Toulouse-Lautrec used to go even to the houses of ill repute. Okay. Yes. So that is vitality. Okay.
To study. To study it.
Yeah.
To see the life.
But regarding this art, so in the foundations he says that the real purpose of art is to depict the supra-physical realities, not what you are seeing. I mean, what is there? If you are seeing, you can paint it, but the real purpose of art is to, like, I don't know, the forms of gods and goddesses.
Yes. That was the justification for Cubism and the going beyond the form.
And Cubism.
Abstractions.
Abstraction and Cubism.
That's right. The idea was form is only a superficial aspect. There is something behind the form. Let's try to capture that. So why should I put the nose here and the eyes here? That's only the outer form. So let me put the eyes and the nose, I mix the arm and put them somewhere else. So this was the idea behind modern art. But it was not successful, one has to admit.
It's like revolt against classical art, like this.
It was a revolt against classical art, but it was not very successful. Just like in poetry also, Walt Whitman decided that he would like to do prose poems. Not that it was very successful, but it is trying to go beyond the fixed rules.
Yes, okay? To break the rules.
Yeah, to break the rules and go beyond them. That was the whole idea. It's not that the effort was right, but the result was not very satisfactory.
But it brought something else after that.
Huh?
It brought something else.
Yeah,
it went on another stage.
Yeah.
No?
So that's what he's saying here. Art attains to vitality. Okay. So, and then not only that, thought assures its abstractions, because when you come in contact with the difficulties of life, okay, then you know how to deal with them. In fact, that is the reason why Sri Aurobindo's letters are so interesting. It's very, very apt here. Sri Aurobindo wrote huge amount of letters guiding sadhaks in how to deal with the problems of the world and psychology, your own psychology. Otherwise, it will have been abstract. I want a spiritual life, abstract. But you have to go down into details and get not abstractions, but by assures, thought assures its abstractions. Okay? It makes it very, very, they become concrete. The generalizations of the philosopher base themselves on a stable foundation of science and experience. Science is always going into the detail of the processes of things. So here also you have to go into the processes of things. So clear? Although the mental man withdraws from life in a disgust, he need not do that. That's what basically he's saying. Now we go to the next para. Okay? This mixing with life may, however, be pursued for the sake of the individual mind and with an entire indifference to the forms of the material existence or the uplifting of the race. This indifference is seen at its highest in the Epicurean discipline and is not entirely absent from the Stoic. Okay? And even altruism does the works of compassion more often for its own sake rather than for the sake of the world it helps. But this too is a limited fulfillment. The progressive mind is seen at its noblest when it strives to elevate the whole race to its own level, whether by sowing broadcast the image of its own thought and fulfillment, or by changing the material life of the race into fresh forms, religious, intellectual, social, or political, intended to represent more nearly that ideal of truth, beauty, justice, righteousness with which the man's own soul is illumined. Failure in such a field matters little, for the mere attempt is dynamic and creative. The struggle of mind to elevate life is the promise and condition of the conquest of life by that which is higher even than mind. Okay? So now, he is discussing here that even a mental life benefits by not withdrawing from life. Okay? By mixing with life. We'll go sentence by sentence. This mixing with life may, however, be pursued for the sake of the individual mind and with an entire indifference to the forms of the material existence or the uplifting of the race. Sri Aurobindo, throughout his writings, constantly, he is concerned with the collective and the individual. In India, until for a long time, the ideal of spiritual life was the liberation of the individual. They were hardly bothered about the society. Here is Sri Aurobindo saying the society also has to benefit. There has to be a progress and evolution in the physical world. Everybody must go to the next level. So if an individual is going and getting liberation and becoming a perfect consciousness he is getting, what difference does it make to the physical world which is at the same level? So you have to, the individual after getting his own perfection must participate in the collective evolution. He must come down and become a part of that, and he must participate in that. That's what he's saying all the time. So now he is saying here that very often the mental man, even with his idealism, he is doing it only for himself and not bothering too much about the... Okay? So, may be pursued for the sake of the individual mind and with an entire indifference to the forms of the material existence or the uplifting of the race. This indifference is seen at its highest in the Epicurean discipline. So, Epicureanism is a philosophy which originated in Greece. Also Stoicism. So, what is Epicureanism and what is Stoicism we have to see. So, Epicureanism, hedonism, it's the same thing. Anmol?
Yes. The dictionary meaning I remember of the word epicure is gourmet, Gourmet, which means basically delighting in all the sense pleasures.
Yeah. But there also, there are two types of interpretations for hedonism. Hedonism is the pursuit of enjoyment. But there can be a lower enjoyment and there can be a higher enjoyment also. Okay? The higher enjoyment is when you are
Harmony,
taking pleasure
beauty,
in finer things,
yeah,
in art,
harmony, beauty,
in music. That's right.
poetry.
Yeah, poetry.
That's what they were famous for.
That's right. But there is also hedonism, which is the lower one. Okay, so so there are two. So this was originated in ancient Greece, 300 BC. Okay, and Stoicism also was
Ascetic. They were ascetic, right?
Not ascetic in that sense, but you teach yourself to bear the shocks of life without being influenced.
Sparta was Stoic. Sparta. There was a city in Greece called Sparta.
Yeah. Sparta and Athens.
They were all were warriors.
Yes.
And they were practicing philosophy of Stoicism.
Yes. A Stoic is one who teaches himself how to endure the shocks of life without being affected. In our Indian idea, it corresponds to samatha. You have to be absolutely calm and quiet and not be affected at all. Neither by pleasure nor by pain.
They were training from childhood their children to sleep on the open without any blanket.
Yeah.
So to bear cold, hunger, everything.
That's
so they were growing, bringing up them very stoically.
Yeah, that's right. Even Swayamdev used to do that, for your information. On a hot summer day, when the terrace is absolutely very, very hot, he used to walk there to teach himself how
Stoicism.
to bear the heat in the legs. And I can tell you, because my terrace is there, and when I go, I can tell you it really burns.
Yes.
Because it absorbs.
Shloka in the second chapter of the Gita, which says, if you can't bear the touches of hot and cold, you are not fit for immortality.
That's right. So this is Stoicism.
And Epicureanism seems to be more specifically about food and drink. So it looks like a subset of hedonism.
Hedonism, that's right. So enjoyment, okay, vital enjoyment. So, so he's saying, and even altruism. Altruism is philanthropy, okay, humanitarianism. And even altruism does the works of compassion more often for its own sake than for the sake of the world it helps. Now, this is an interesting sentence what he's saying, because he repeats this idea many times. I get a lot of satisfaction if I help somebody, okay? And on my birthday or I feed 100 people. I call all the poor people and feed them. I get great egoistic satisfaction. So it is ego-based. From the material point of view, altruism, philanthropy, humanitarianism is fine from the material point of view or from even the moral point of view. But from the spiritual point of view, it is egoistic action. So it doesn't have a spiritual value. That's what he's pointing out.
Mother was saying that to transform this altruistic people is more difficult because they're very right in society views, no?
That is one of the things which people don't understand about the ashram. They were not engaged in charity works.
Feeding people, no?
Yeah.
They were saying about ashram.
There are many who used to come and say, why you people don't open free dispensaries for people, things like that. But one has to understand this. Charity is fine, but are you solving the problem of suffering in the world? No. You open a hospital. Are you solving the problem of illness forever? No. It's temporary. So you try for something more fundamental. You try for a spiritual foundation where the evolution is going to a higher level. So you put all your energies into that higher effort. There are enough people in the physical world to do the other work. That was the whole idea. But this has been much misunderstood. But this is the truth. You have to concentrate on what you have to do. Okay?
In Buddhism, he says altruism is often the sublimest form of selfishness.
Yes. Because you get satisfaction. Now, it's a very interesting subject, okay, I'm telling you. There was somebody who came and told Mother, I'll give you 1 lakh rupees. You can make a boarding for the children because there is no boarding, but please put my name on the door, okay? This boarding, so and so boarding. So, What is this? He is giving 1 lakh, okay? But it's an egoistic action.
He wants acknowledgement.
Yeah. Now, I tell you something else more interesting. Somebody gives money to somebody else and doesn't want any report on that. Doesn't want any report. He doesn't want his name on the board. He doesn't want it. Now tell me, is this also a spiritual action? You will get more satisfaction. You will say, look, I am not even taking credit for what I am doing. The ego is even more boosted up. You understand? So this ego is always there. It takes so many different forms. Okay. So, in fact, there are many. There are some Bollywood actors and all that who do charity work without announcing. But that doesn't mean that it's a spiritual action. Okay.
When it will become a spiritual action?
When there is no ego. That's all. It's very simple. And when there is no ego, you can help in other ways than material ways. Okay. So that's a very interesting thing.
Charity has a very stark aphorism where he says, our public charities are the first tardy awakening in the conscience of a robber.
There you are. I've been stealing all this time. Now let me give a little Robin Hood. Okay. So,
Altruism.
and even altruism does the works of compassion more often for its own sake than for the sake of the world it helps. But this too is a limited fulfillment. The progressive mind. Now, the word progressive mind is something he uses again and again, okay? The progressive mind is one which wants perfection, improvement, not a status quo. He has told you very clearly in the earlier one that the material man wants a status quo. He doesn't want any disturbance. He wants to continue what is there already. But the mind, the mental man is always seeking for perfection and improvement. That's exactly what science is doing. Constantly trying to get rid of diseases, improving things, even your phones. 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, constant improvement is there. So the progressive mind is that which always wants change and progress. So progressive mind. The progressive mind is seen at its noblest when it strives to elevate the whole race to its own level, whether by showing broadcast the image of its own thought and fulfillment, or by changing the material life of the race into fresh forms, religious, intellectual, social, or political, intended to represent more nearly the ideal of truth, beauty, justice, righteousness, with which the man's own soul is illumined. Now, there is a question of grammar also here. I'll just tell you. Okay, the word broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
What is its grammatical function here? Okay, the progressive mind is seen at its noblest when it strives to elevate the whole race to its own level, whether by sowing broadcast the image of its own. Okay, the word broadcast here, I had a lot of problem. I remember, broadcast is a radio station is broadcasting, a television station is broadcasting, okay? But broadcast is a verb usually. And then what is this use of, what has Srimdo done? You go to the dictionary and you find its use as an adverb.
Mm-hmm.
So how accurate Srimdo is, he is never wrong. Whenever you check the dictionary, he is using it always in the right. So here you have to read it as, where is it gone? By sowing widely.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it means. Okay? By sowing widely the image of its own thought and fulfillment, or by changing the material life of the race into fresh forms, religious, intellectual, social, or political, intended to represent more nearly that ideal of truth, beauty, justice, righteousness, with which the man's own soul is illumined. What better description for this than Srimdo's own work? Okay? If you look carefully, you are trying to go to another level. Until now in India, the idea has been yoga for individual sake. Okay? And liberation is enough. But now he is putting fresh forms. He is saying liberation is not enough. You have to go beyond liberation also.
I have a question in this. I mean, you're saying that they were only concerned about their individual, but all these acharyas, Shankara for example, Ramanuja, then these Kabir and Bhakti saints, Chaitanya, weren't they carrying out these movements and weren't they trying to...
I'm talking of the ideal of spiritual life. They were all advocating liberation. Liberation is more than enough.
But in the Light Divine, he says that the liberation of the individual is the fulcrum, something like that, the sentence is there.
No, of course.
So the pivot, he says. That is the pivot on which the whole thing centers. So if you don't focus on the liberation of the individual, how are you going to liberate everybody?
No, that's exactly what you have to understand. I'm not saying that you should not liberate yourself. I'm saying that liberation is not the end of spiritual life. Liberation is not the end of spiritual. That's why people have to understand when Sri Aurobindo says, my yoga starts where the others are ending, it's not an egoistic statement.
Yeah.
It's a factual statement that after getting liberation, you don't run away. You have to participate in the physical world and do God's work in the physical world. That is what is meant.
But most of those people, right? I mean, say, for example, Buddha, he, after achieving Nirvana, he lived for 45 years and helped, thousands or maybe lakhs of people get liberated, right? So it's not like they just disappear, right?
Yeah, I'm a little hard of hearing. Can you repeat what she said?
What she's saying is that people like Buddha, for example,
Yes.
after attaining Nirvana,
Yes.
he didn't run away. She's saying that he liberated thousands, probably lakhs of people.
So in that case, Buddha is not an ascetic. The running away is the ascetic. Buddha was not an ascetic in that sense.
Because he lived for 45 years.
Yes, but but the aim of it,
humanity, right?
he was helping the others, no doubt. That's why he's not an ascetic. But the aim of his spiritual life is liberation, removal of suffering. That's all. In Buddha, the main idea is get rid of your suffering. And you do that by liberating yourself. He was certainly not an ascetic in that sense.
So Sri Aurobindo is saying, once you have liberated yourself, it is your duty to liberate others.
Yes.
But I thought that's what Buddha did, right? I mean, he helped so many
Buddha is not being
people.
taken as an example of an ascetic,
Okay.
a selfish person who is concerned only with his own liberation. We are not thinking of Buddha on those lines.
In fact, Sri Aurobindo is not saying that Buddha is an ascetic at all. He says he is an avatar.
Yes, he is in one of the
Yes.
right?
Okay. The running away from life is the ascetic. Okay. There are any number of people, as he says that in the essays on the Gita also, that running away from the physical world was not the only thing in India. There are many, many other schools of thought, many other ideas, many other remaining in the physical world, many attempts also. Okay. Even the idea I remind you of, Trishanku. He wanted to go to heaven with his body. What does this mean? Think about it.
Physical immortality.
Yes. And that idea is exactly what Sri Aurobindo is wanting.
And actually, if you see Mahabharata, the way it ends, so Yudhishthira supposedly goes to heaven in his physical body.
Exactly.
So it is nothing but physical immortality which is the same time.
Sri Aurobindo is saying that in India, liberation of the Indian was not the only aim. But he is talking that largely it affected.
And interestingly, the Mahabharata original piece is called Jaya. So, and this was the title of the epic, and this was the culmination. So basically, victory meant physical immortality. I mean, you can connect the dots. It's not difficult.
So he doesn't say that that's the only thing. In fact, he says very clearly in the essay on the Gita that there are many other. The Vedic period was not rejecting life. The Tantric also does not reject life. Even the Gita does not reject life. Okay, all these are examples of things which they were not rejecting life. But it was largely practiced. Individual liberation is the aim of life, spiritual life. So that's what we are saying. So we come back to our sentence. The progressive mind is seen at its noblest when it strives to elevate the whole race to its own level, whether by showing broadcast the image of its own thought and fulfillment, or by changing the material life of the race into fresh forms, religious, intellectual, social or political, intended to represent more nearly that ideal of truth, beauty, justice, righteousness with which the man's own soul is illumined. So, there are people who do that, and that in that case, the progressive mind is seen at its best. That's what he's saying. Not like the other one who is helping mankind and mixing with the world, but in an egoistic manner. He's giving all the different types of mixing with the world. Okay? The struggle of mind to elevate life is the promise and condition of the conquest of life by that which is higher even than mind.
Ranganath, failure in such a field matters little. You missed that. You missed one sentence. Failure in...
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed that.
No problem.
Failure in such a field matters little, for the mere attempt is dynamic and creative. Now, this is a very interesting sentence also you have to see, because Sri Aurobindo says constantly, error is the handmaiden of truth. Why? Because only when you make a mistake, you know what to do to avoid that mistake.
What is handmaiden?
Handmaiden means going hand in hand together. So, companion if you want. Okay? Truth and error always go together.
Through mistake, you learn a lot.
That doesn't mean that you should do errors.
No.
But when you make an error, you have to take full advantage of it and understand what is the purpose of error. It teaches you not to do something. Only when you make an error, you know exactly what to do. The very good example is going into space. Okay? First you try something, it fails. Then you analyze and find out why it has failed. Now you correct it. So it becomes more and more perfect, more and more perfect. Okay. Even in yoga, this is applicable in every field. In fact, the best example is given is Thomas Alva Edison. He invented the bulb after 250 attempts. Did he give up? No, he didn't. And incidentally, he is a very interesting case of the material, not the material man, but the mental man who is interested only in doing things. There is a very interesting story about him, and I'll tell you that to show how he is not a material man at all. Although he was dealing with material things, he was a mental man because he was using his talents for creating new things. The amount of patents that he had is huge. Okay, there is a very interesting story about him, and that illustrates his point about not being a material man.
Mm-hmm.
He invented the wireless. Okay, so some businessman came to him and told him that you have patented this, you hand it over to us, and we'll give you $10,000. Okay, so he said, fine, no problem. So the deal was done. It was done, and it was handed over to him. They said, we will exploit this commercially. He said, fine, no problem. After the deal was done, they told him, Mr. Edison, you are not a very practical man. We gave you $10,000, but we would have given you $100,000 if you had asked for it. Then he said, gentlemen, I would say that you are also not practical. Then he said, how? He said, if you had offered me $5,000, I would have accepted. So this shows that money is not at all the issue. He is interested only in his mental progress and interest.
He's interested in science and discovery things.
A handmaid means a female servant, a subservient partner or element.
Yeah, partner.
Dasi basically.
That's right. Okay, so that's what he means here. Failure in each field matters little, for the mere attempt is dynamic and creative. Note creative, what does it mean? If I make a mistake today and somebody else is going to try in the same field, he knows now what to avoid because he knows that this is a failure. So each failure is actually a step on the way to progress, success. This is how you have to understand it. Okay? So, failure in such a field matters little, for the mere attempt is dynamic and creative. The struggle of mind. You have to understand Srivada's language. Dynamic we understand because it's engaged in action. But how creative? How can failure be creative? It is creating the right conditions for the next man to come and go one step up. Okay? So, the struggle of mind to elevate life is the promise and condition of the conquest of life by that which is higher even than mind. With the mind, you can't solve the problems of the physical world. But with spiritual power, to a certain extent, it is possible. To a certain extent. The real power is only at the third level, the supramental level. That highest thing, which is that which is above the mind, the spiritual existence. So, that highest thing, the spiritual existence, is concerned with the what is eternal, but not therefore entirely aloof from the transient. For the spiritual man, the mind's dream of perfect beauty is realized in eternal love, beauty, and delight that has no dependence and is equal behind all objective appearances. Its dream of perfect truth in the supreme, self-existent, self-apparent, and eternal verity, which never varies but explains and is the secret of all variations and the goal of all progress. Its dream of perfect action in the omnipotent and self-guiding law that is inherent forever in all things and translates itself here in the rhythm of the worlds. What is fugitive vision or constant effort of creation in the brilliant self is an eternally existing reality in the self that knows and is a Lord.
Footnote for nose.
Suddenly Srindu is having very small paras, which is very unusual for him.
Yeah, afterlife divine. There is a footnote.
So-
Footnote.
In the self that knows is a Lord. And that knows and is a Lord. Okay. He has put a footnote on knows. Okay. In the self that knows and is a Lord. So, we'll come to that at the end. So,
Yes,
we'll read it
okay.
at the end. We'll go from the beginning and come to that. Okay. That highest thing, which is the spiritual existence. So, now he is coming to the spiritual life. He has discussed the material life. He has discussed the material life, mental life. Now he is coming to the spiritual life. Now, interestingly, note, the characteristic of the material life is stability and no change, self-preservation. You want to remain at that level. The characteristic of mental life is opposite, change, progress. Now, again opposite. When you come to the spiritual life, you have to attain to a place where there is no change. There is immutability, eternity. So it's interesting how the gradation is there.
Or rather combine the two. I mean, have the basis of eternity and yet a constant progress.
Yes, but progress is based on stability and immutability. Okay, so that highest thing, the spiritual existence, is concerned with what is eternal, not transient, but not therefore entirely aloof from the transient, because the ascetic may say that the transient has no importance. It is there today, it disappears tomorrow. But Srivada says that the divine takes three poises. He is transcendent, he is cosmic, and he is also individual. In other words, he can be outside the universe, but he can also be in the universe, and he can also be in the individual. So, the physical world is not only transience and meaninglessness. Behind the transience and behind the form, there is the divine presence. That's what he is pointing out. Okay, so it's not entirely aloof from the transient. But he's saying not therefore entirely aloof. In other words, he is more visible in the self than in the physical world. Okay? Because in the self, there is no change at all. Whereas here in the physical world, the forms are changing, but behind the form is a stability. Okay, so he is using the word entirely because of that. I do from the run. For the spiritual man, the mind's dream of perfect beauty is realized in an eternal love, beauty, and delight that has no dependence. It doesn't depend on anything and is equal behind all objective appearances. Its dream of perfect truth in the supreme, self-existent, self-apparent, and eternal verity which never varies, no variation, but explains and is the secret of all variations and the goal of all progress. Its dream of perfect action in the omnipotent and self-guiding law that is inherent forever in all things and translates itself here in the rhythm of the worlds. He has put many phrases and he is discussing one by one. Okay, so we'll look at that. What is he saying? Spiritual man, the mind's dream of perfect beauty is realized in it. The mind is dreaming of perfect beauty. But can he get it at the mental level? He can't. But in the spiritual, he can go. It is realized in eternal love, beauty and delight. When you go to the spiritual level, you can get eternal love, beauty and delight. Can you get that in the mental world? No. You can get glimpses of it, but not eternal. That has no dependence. At our level, love, beauty, delight are all dependent on certain physical things. I enjoy anything pleasant, I enjoy, okay? But when that enjoyment, that pleasant thing is not there, I suffer. So it is not, mentally you will never get what he is saying. You have to go to the spiritual level to get the permanent thing, okay? Very clear. What the mind wants, in other words, what he is saying, what the mind wants, perfect beauty, it can be realized only in the spiritual field. Realized in an eternal love, beauty and delight. Note the word eternal. Eternal love is not existing in the physical world. Beauty, delight, that has no dependence, and is equal behind all objective appearances. All objective appearances, physical forms, but it is there behind. Its dream of perfect truth in the supreme, self-existent. The dream of mind for perfect truth cannot be realized in the mind. You have to go to the spiritual level. He has started the sentence with that highest thing. So you have to go there to get the ideals of the mind. Not in its own field, not possible. You have to go to the spiritual level. There, truth in the supreme, self-existent, self-apparent, and eternal verity which never varies. Self-existent. It doesn't depend on anything else. It depends only on itself. In other words, totally independent of any cause. There is no cause for it. Okay. Self-apparent. It reveals itself. And eternal verity which never varies. In our physical world, truth is going on changing. Today what is true may not be true tomorrow. But in the spiritual world, truth is stable and eternal. It doesn't change. Where is it gone? Yeah, in the supreme self-apparent and eternal verity which never varies. So he has discussed delight, then he has discussed truth, now he is discussing action. Okay? Which never varies but explains, is the secret of all variations and the goal of all progress. Its dream of perfect action, okay, is in the omnipotent and self-guiding law that is inherent forever in all things. Omnipotence, very clear. Self-guiding law. There is a law, and that law guides you. Self-guiding law that is inherent forever in all things and translates itself here in the rhythm of the worlds. Sri Aurobindo very often uses the word rhythm of the worlds. Now it's very interesting. He says that all action in the physical world is rhythm. If you think about it, it's really true. Everything is rhythmic. Action is rhythmic in the physical world. The earth is going around the sun in rhythm, 365 days. My heart is beating in rhythm. Okay? There is a seasons also come in rhythm.
Cycle. In the cycle,
Cycles.
no?
Not only cycle, but rhythm.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Cycle cannot be in rhythm. It can be long, short, this, that. So, rhythm is a very important aspect of the physical life of action. Okay? So, in the rhythm of the world. Now, this sentence also is very interesting. We'll see what he's saying. What is fugitive vision or constant effort of creation in the brilliant self is an eternally existing reality in the self that knows and is the Lord. So, fugitive vision. In the mind, when you are trying to get truth, you cannot get truth in the mind. You can get relative truth. It is fugitive. It is running away. I try to grasp truth with my mind, I can't do it. It is fugitive. But in the mind, if it is fugitive, it is not fugitive in the brilliant self. So, you have to read the sentence in this way. I am telling you this because I had difficulty in understanding the sentence.
Okay.
What is fugitive vision or constant effort of creation, comma, in the brilliant self is an eternally existing reality.
Coma. Because that is more clear.
Yeah, he's referring to the Hiranyagarbha and the next one of the Mandukya Upanishad.
Yeah. What is fugitive here and cannot be got in the physical world can be got in the self.
The word for that is not Hiranyagarbha. In fact, the word for that is Taijasa, which means the brilliant.
Yeah. So what is fugitive vision or constant effort of creation, comma, okay? He doesn't use comma stream though. You have to supply the comma yourself. Okay? So, in the brilliant self is an eternally existing reality. In the self that knows and is the Lord. Now we can go to that knows.
That's
Yeah, that's the Prajna, the third one.
Prajna. The unified in whom conscious thought is concentrated, who is all delight and enjoyer of delight, the wise. He is the Lord of all, the omniscient, the inner guide. He is quoting from the Mandukya Upanishad.
the unified means what here? The unified means what?
Yes.
The one. Okay.
No variation. In the physical world, there is multiplicity. But when you go to the self, there is only oneness.
One. Okay. The unified.
The unified, in whom conscious thought is concentrated. Okay? That's interesting. Chit Ghana is the word used. Our concentration, our mental awareness is diverse, distributed,
Scattered.
and going here, there, okay? Always diluted, but there it is concentrated, okay? So, that's what he's saying. Conscious thought is concentrated, who is all delight and enjoyer of delight. He is himself the delight and is also enjoying the delight. The wise, okay? He is the Lord of all, the omniscient, the inner guide. This is Mandukya Upanishad.
Thank you.